March 18, 1940, 11:47 p.m., Hut 6, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. Gordon Welchman stares at a chalkboard covered in German intercepted messages that might as well be hieroglyphics. Around him, Britain's best mathematicians have been working for 6 months to crack the Enigma cipher. They're failing. Alan Turing's revolutionary bombe machine sits in the next room, a magnificent clicking electromechanical beast that theoretically could decrypt German messages. Theoretically. In practice, it would take 20 million years to try every possible rotor combination. 20 million years. Welchman isn't a cryptographer. He's an algebraic geometry lecturer who spent his Cambridge summers helping his uncle sort invoices at an accounting firm. But as he stares at the intercepted messages scattered across 3 different desks, naval codes here, Luftwaffe intercepts there, Wehrmacht signals over there, something clicks in his mind. He's seen this problem before, not with Nazi ciphers, with filing cabinets. In 72 hours, his solution will reduce Enigma decryption from impossible to 6 hours. And the accountant who never fired a shot will save more Allied lives than any general in the war. Alan Turing knew they were losing. Every day, German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, coordinating Wolfpack attacks through encrypted Enigma messages. Every night, Luftwaffe bombers received targeting orders that British intelligence couldn't read. Every hour, Wehrmacht commanders transmitted troop movements across a communication network that was, for all practical purposes, unbreakable. The Enigma machine wasn't just secure, it was mathematically obscene. Picture a typewriter connected to 3 rotating wheels, rotors, each with 26 positions. Type a letter, and the rotors spin, sending electrical current through a maze of wiring that transforms A into, say, Q. But that's not all. The Germans added a plug board that swapped letter pairs before the rotors even engaged. Then they made the rotor order variable. You could arrange them in any sequence. And the rotor starting positions? Changed daily according to codebooks. The number of possible daily settings, 158,962,55, 217,826,360,000, 158 quintillion combinations. Turing had built the bombe to attack this monster. It was brilliant, a machine that could simulate multiple Enigma machines simultaneously, testing rotor positions against intercepted text. If you had a crib, a known piece of plain text that matched the encrypted message, the bombe could theoretically find the correct settings. But theoretically was the problem. Even with cribs, the bombe had to test thousands of rotor configurations. Without knowing the plug board settings, those letter swaps, the machine was searching for a needle in a haystack the size of the observable universe. Turing's calculations were devastating. With current technology and methods, a brute force approach would take approximately 20 million years. Britain didn't have 20 million years. It had maybe 12 months before the U-boat blockade starved the island into submission. That's when Gordon Welchman walked into Hut 6. Welchman was 31 years old, soft-spoken, with round spectacles that made him look more like a librarian than a codebreaker. He'd been recruited from Cambridge, where he taught algebraic geometry, abstract mathematics about shapes and spaces that had absolutely no practical application to anything, let alone cryptography. The head of Bletchley Park had recruited him almost by accident. They needed mathematicians. Welchman was a mathematician. That's all the vetting he got. For weeks, Welchman wandered Bletchley Park like a tourist, trying to understand what everyone was doing. He watched Dilly Knox, the veteran codebreaker who'd cracked German codes in World War I, painstakingly analyze letter frequencies. He observed Turing sketching circuit diagrams for bombe improvements. He sat in on briefings where intelligence officers explained how desperately the military needed actionable intelligence. And slowly, Welchman began to notice something that no one else had articulated. The problem wasn't the bombe. The machine was magnificent. The problem was how they were feeding information into it. Each hut at Bletchley Park worked in isolation. Hut 6 handled Army and Air Force Enigma. Hut 8 tackled Naval Enigma. They didn't share cribs. They didn't cross-reference rotor settings. When Hut 6 discovered that the Germans used EANS, 1, frequently in military messages, Hut 8 didn't know about it. It was like having 3 separate filing systems for the same company, with no index connecting them. Welchman had spent 2 summers organizing his uncle's accounting firm in Cambridge. The firm handled multiple clients: construction companies, textile manufacturers, a small shipping concern. Each client's invoices were filed separately. But Welchman had created a cross-reference system. When a construction company ordered textile materials, he'd note it in both files. When the shipping concern transported construction materials, he'd link those records too. The system created a web. You could start with one invoice and trace connections to a dozen others. It made everything searchable, efficient, fast. On March 18, 1940, Welchman realized he could do the same thing with Enigma messages. He approached Turing in the canteen, a drafty wooden building where codebreakers ate reconstituted eggs and drank watery tea. Turing was hunched over a notebook, sketching circuit modifications that might shave minutes off bomb processing time. "Alan," Welchman said, sitting down without invitation, "what if we're thinking about this wrong?" Turing looked up, his expression mildly annoyed. He had work to do. "The bomb tests rotor positions," Welchman continued, "but it tests them sequentially, one at a time. What if we could test multiple positions simultaneously by cross-referencing different messages?" Turing blinked. "The messages are different days, different keys, but the plugboard settings aren't completely random," Welchman interrupted. "The Germans reuse letter pairs. If we intercept enough messages in a single day, we can map which letters are likely swapped. Then we feed that information back into the bomb, not as a guess, but as a constraint that eliminates entire branches of possibilities." Turing set down his pencil. "How?" Welchman pulled out a piece of paper and sketched a grid, letters along both axes, like a multiplication table. "We create a diagonal board. Every time we identify a probable letter pair from any message, we mark it here. The board becomes a living map of that day's plugboard settings. We feed this map into the bomb before it starts processing. The machine doesn't test every combination. It only tests combinations consistent with known pairs." "That's," Turing trailed off, his eyes darting across Welchman's sketch. "That's essentially a mechanical filing system." "Yes. For information." "Yes." Turing was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a rare expression that transformed his usually severe face. "That might actually work." It would do more than work. It would change everything. Building the diagonal board took 3 days. Welchman commandeered a workshop in Hut 6's basement and recruited 2 engineers who'd been repairing Bombe components. His design was almost embarrassingly simple: a square board, 2 feet on each side, with letters A through Z along each edge. The interior was divided into a 26x26 grid of sockets, 696 positions total. When 2 letters were identified as a plugboard pair, say A and T, you'd insert a plug into the AT intersection. The board was wired so that marking AT automatically marked TA, since plugboard swaps were reciprocal. As you added more pairs, the board built a physical map of that day's likely plugboard configuration. But the genius wasn't the board itself. It was what Welchman did with the information it contained. He ran cables from the diagonal board directly into the bomb's input system. Now, before the bomb began testing rotor positions, it would first check whether a given configuration was consistent with known plugboard pairs. If a rotor setting produced a result that contradicted the diagonal board, if it implied A was swapped with both T and Q, which was impossible, the bomb would skip that entire branch of possibilities. Entire branches, not individual settings. Branches containing thousands of combinations, eliminated instantaneously. The first test came on March 22, 1940. They had intercepted a German Luftwaffe message at 0600 hours, a routine weather report probably. Turing had identified a crib. The message almost certainly contained weather, somewhere in the plain text. Without the diagonal board, the bomb would need to test approximately 18,000 rotor positions to find the right settings. Welchman spent 2 hours building a preliminary plugboard map from earlier messages intercepted that same day. He identified 4 probable letter pairs: EQ, RT, WX, and AN. 4 pairs, just 4 pieces of information. He plugged them into the diagonal board, connected the cables, initialized the bomb. The machine clattered to life, a symphony of clicking relays and spinning drums that sounded like a factory full of angry typewriters. Turing, Welchman, and a half-dozen other cryptanalysts stood in the cold room, watching, waiting. 6 minutes later, the bomb stopped. It had found a match. They fed the rotor settings into a test Enigma machine and typed the encrypted message. German letters appeared. Wetter Nordwest wind, 20 Knoten. Weather report, northwest wind, 20 knots, 6 minutes. The room erupted. People were shaking hands, clapping shoulders, laughing with exhausted relief. Someone ran to fetch Commander Edward Travis, the deputy director. Turing was grinning like a child on Christmas morning. But Welchman was already at the chalkboard, sketching improvements, because 6 minutes was good. But it wasn't good enough. Over the next 2 weeks, Welchman refined the system obsessively. He realized that plugboard pairs weren't isolated. They formed clusters. If A swapped with T, and T appeared frequently with E in German military vocabulary, then you could infer probable relationships between A and E. He developed algorithms for pair propagation, using one known swap to predict others. He created standardized procedures for the women operating the bombs, the Wrens of the Women's Royal Naval Service, who did the exhausting work of configuring machines and monitoring output. Instead of waiting for complete plugboard maps, they would start bombs with partial information and update the diagonal board in real time as new pairs were discovered. It was iterative, dynamic, more like accounting than mathematics, balancing books, cross-referencing entries, finding discrepancies, and resolving them. By mid-April, average decryption time had dropped to 90 minutes. By May, they were breaking Enigma messages in under an hour. And then Welchman had another idea. He was reviewing decrypted Luftwaffe messages when he noticed something odd. The Germans were sloppy. Radio operators would sometimes use the same message preamble, the same opening phrase, across multiple transmissions. And all to all was common. So was keine besonderen Ereignisse, nothing special to report. These repeated phrases appeared in different messages, encrypted with different rotor settings, but always with the same plugboard configuration, because they were sent on the same day. Welchman realized he could use these repetitions as automatic cribs. If you intercepted 2 messages with identical opening encrypted sequences, you knew they shared the same plaintext phrase. You didn't need to guess the crib. The Germans were telling you. He called them sillies, after a particularly careless German operator named Silly, whose lazy habits made her messages easy to crack. With sillies feeding cribs and the diagonal board constraining plugboard possibilities, the bomb became devastatingly efficient. By June 1940, Bletchley Park was decrypting an average of 50 German messages per day. By August, over 100. By the end of the year, they'd broken more than 30,000 Enigma intercepts. But the real test was yet to come. Because knowing how to break Enigma and using that intelligence to win battles were 2 very different problems. May 24, 1941, year to 3:40 hours, Admiralty Headquarters, London. Admiral John Tovey holds a decrypt in his hands that was impossible 18 months ago. It's a German naval message intercepted 4 hours earlier, broken by Bletchley Park at 200 and delivered to his desk by motorcycle courier 30 minutes ago. The message is from the battleship Bismarck, reporting its position and intended route through the Denmark Strait. 4 hours from interception to Tovey's desk. 4 hours. Before Welchman's diagonal board, this message would have been gibberish. The Bismarck would have slipped through the British blockade, reached the Atlantic convoy routes, and slaughtered merchant ships until running out of ammunition. The war might have been lost. Instead, Tovey plots an intercept course. By May 27th, the Bismarck will be at the bottom of the Atlantic, and 2,000 German sailors will be dead. This was the real power of Welchman's innovation, not just breaking codes, but breaking them fast enough to matter. 6-hour decryption meant actionable intelligence. It meant convoys could reroute around U-boat wolf packs. It meant RAF bombers could hit German supply depots the same day they received supply shipments. It meant Allied commanders knew German plans before German field officers did. The U-boat war was won in Hut 6, not the Atlantic. Between 1941 and 1943, U-boat effectiveness collapsed. In early 1941, German submarines were sinking over 500,000 tons of Allied shipping per month. By mid-1943, that number had dropped to under 200,000 tons, and U-boat losses had tripled. The Germans never understood why. They kept trusting Enigma, kept believing their communications were secure. After all, the mathematics said Enigma was unbreakable. But Welchman hadn't broken the mathematics. He'd organized the information. He'd turned cryptography into accounting. And accounting, it turned out, could win wars. By 1942, Bletchley Park employed over 7,000 people, with Welchman coordinating the entire operation. The diagonal board system had evolved into a vast intelligence network, cross-referencing not just Enigma messages, but also direction-finding data, traffic analysis, and decrypts from other Axis codes. Welchman created what modern intelligence services would call data fusion, information from dozens of sources, synthesized in real time, producing intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. And he did it all with filing systems. Gordon Welchman never fired a weapon, never commanded troops, never flew a mission or captained a ship. After the war, he was sworn to secrecy under the Official Secrets Act. He couldn't tell his wife what he'd done, couldn't tell his children. For 30 years, his contribution to Allied victory was classified. When the Enigma secret was finally declassified in the 1970s, historians focused on Turing, rightfully so. Turing's theoretical breakthroughs made the bomb possible, but Welchman's practical improvements made it effective. Turing built the engine, Welchman built the road. Together, they shortened the war by an estimated 2 years. Eisenhower himself said that Enigma intelligence was decisive to Allied victory. Historians estimate it saved hundreds of thousands of lives, maybe millions, and it all came from an accountant's filing system. There's a memorial at Bletchley Park now. Gordon Welchman's name is on it, carved in stone next to Turing's and the other cryptographers who won the secret war. But perhaps the greatest tribute to Welchman isn't carved in stone. It's embedded in every database, every cross-reference system, every intelligence network that modern governments use. The diagonal board was the first practical implementation of what we now call relational databases, systems that link information across multiple sources to find patterns that would be invisible when looking at sources individually. Modern intelligence agencies use Welchman's principles every day. So do Google and Facebook and Amazon, the algorithms that recommend products, that predict behavior, that connect disparate pieces of information into actionable intelligence. They're all descendants of that diagonal board. Welchman took an impossible problem and made it solvable by refusing to accept the problem as stated. Turing asked, "How do we break Enigma faster?" Welchman asked, "How do we organize our information better?" One was a mathematician's question, the other was an accountant's. Sometimes the accountant's question is more powerful.